teams. But if he goes out and does his job, I very well see a pathway and an opportunity for him to rise his name back up the ranks in this quarterback class.
What's going on, everybody? The Draft Network Scouting Department here to talk to you about some sleepers for the 2023 NFL Draft. And sleepers is a very loose term that carries a lot of different definitions. But for us here, it's about players who did not land inside the top 75 of our TDN 100, our consensus top 100 prospects eligible for the 2023 NFL Draft, who could potentially sneak their way next spring into the top 32. So we're going on a deep dive here outside the top 75. Keith, I'm going to start with you. Who's a name that pops to you that you think might have a chance to play their way up several rounds worth of stock based on our consensus opinion here at the start of the college football season?
Yep, everyone knows I'm from New Orleans, and so I have to go with a New Orleans guy, 504 we have to put on. But I'm gonna go with center from Georgia, Cedric Van Praan. And I know that's kind of like a out the loop position, right? But I think, we know that the NFL operates in trends. And this past year, we've seen Tyler Lindenbaum go in the first round. We've seen Cam Jurgens go in the second round. And I believe that both of those teams are getting really good returns on their investment, right? Like Cam Jurgens is playing high level football for the Philadelphia Eagles. And so I can see Cedric Van Praan really leaping up the draft board because look, he's in a really good situation at Georgia. They'll run the football heavily. So you'll be able to get a lot of good film. He plays in the SEC. So you'll see him go against SEC caliber defensive linemen. And then also he's athletic, right? Like that's something that jumps off the film to you. So I think when NFL front offices, they analyze and they really scout this guy, they'll say, you know what, this is a complete prospect that we can put in just about any scheme, and I think his draft stock will rise. And I think this is just the beginning of seeing where Cedric Van Praan will go from here.
Let me ask you this as a follow-up to that. Do you think positional value is the biggest reason why he's kind of perceived to be on the outside fringes of this conversation right now?
Yeah, I mean, centers are pretty boring, right? Like nobody talks about centers at the end of the day. So I definitely think it's positional value. And then right now, it's before the college football season starts. So we're talking about quarterbacks. We're talking about who's going to win the Heisman and the best running back. So nobody's talking about offensive linemen, but we know when it gets down to the nitty gritty and teams have to really, build out that offensive line, they're going to, pass up the headline type players, and they're going to go for the players that they know will perform well on the field. And I think Cedric Van Praan is that type of football player.
Well, no hate for the big guys up front here in this group because I know we have got another offensive lineman in this discussion. Brentley, outside the top 75, guy you think could play his way into first-round consideration when it's all said and done.
Yeah, staying with the offensive lineman here, I'm going with Miami's offensive tackle, Zion Nelson. This is a guy who I studied last year. He was definitely kind of considering coming out in the 2022 draft, and I actually gave him a third round grade, excuse me. And there's lots to like about Zion, just in terms of his length. He's 6'5", 315 pounds, really smooth and athletic feet. You see that in pass protection, his ability to mirror and really get range in his pass set and be able to get out there and really kind of defeat and cut off angles against speed rushers. You love that about Zion's game. The issues for him is his hand usage, his balance has been a little spotty at times. He's a little light in his trunk. And so when he wants to anchor against power, he gives up ground. Those things are correctable. He can kind of work on his hands. He can work on his balance. He can try to get in the weight room and add some mass to his lower half. And if he does that, I do think there's a world where a team can be like, look what Charles Cross is doing for it now in the Seahawks preseason. He looks phenomenal. And some of the same concerns I had with Cross, I share with Zion. The lack of power at the point of attack, and maybe not being a road grading offensive tackle, but we're seeing his natural ability as a pass protector shine. And if Zion can make some improvements with some of his deficiencies, I see a pathway for him to really move up the draft boards, especially in this year's offensive tackle class. I think he's naturally going to get pushed up regardless of any improvement because, quite frankly, there's not a true top tier offensive tackles that we collectively love. I think this is a very down year of offensive tackles, but the need for these players in the NFL is never going to go away. So just based on pure supply and demand, that's another reason why I can see Zion, maybe get drafted higher than we think as we sit here today.
And you talk about supply and demand. There's one position that always experiences a lot of demand and never enough supply for high-level players, and that's quarterback. So, Damien, I'm going to come to you and ask you a player that you think could potentially put himself back in the top 32 conversation that was not inside our top 75 on our initial release for a TDN 100.
Yeah, guys. I'm going down to South Carolina, right here in my backyard, to Spencer Rattler, the Oklahoma transfer, 6'1", 215, former 5-star recruit, and he checks a lot of the physical boxes. He has an easy arm. He can make all the throws. He has mobility. And we know at the end of the day, with the NFL, tools matter, right? You have to be able to make plays off script. You have to be able to showcase the arm talent that they look for right now. Yes, you could be a solid to mediocre quarterback. You can win with those guys, but at the end of the day, the NFL still wants dudes at the quarterback position. He has the physical ability to become that. He's reuniting with Shane Beamer, who's now his head coach there. They have some playmakers, Jaheim Bell and Josh Vann, and he brought over his tight end from OU, Austin Stogner, and he has a really high-profile running back who's now healthy, and Marshawn Lloyd over at South Carolina as well. So he has some tools and some players around him as well. And then the fact that he's taken some steps from his own development, going from OU to South Carolina, just being more aware and really honing in on himself. And those are the things that you love to hear and you wanted to see from him. So I think the opportunities will be there. He's in the SEC. He goes out here against some of these big-time schools, the Georgias and the Alabamas, all these other schools that he will see in the SEC this year, guys, and he puts on good performances. The team doesn't have to win those games, right? Because at the end of the day, they may not be well equipped to knock off those upper echelon SEC teams. But if he goes out and does his job, I very well see a pathway and an opportunity for him to rise his name back up the ranks in this quarterback class.
Well, Dame, you talk about the league likes dudes at the quarterback position. I got a dude at the quarterback position. Washington State quarterback Cam Ward is my choice here. And he did sneak onto one ballot at 99th. Right here. But he's coming from Incarnate Word, which is the big question, is he's going to experience a major jump in level of competition. He's transferring to Washington State. But then you look at it closer, and his offensive coordinator at Washington State is going to be his coach that was with him in Incarnate Word. And he's got his favorite wide receiver from Incarnate Word also transferring over to Washington State. So he's got a little bit of familiarity, and he was lighting up the scoreboard when he was playing at Incarnate Word. And you talk about physical tools. We had a chance to meet him out at Steve Clarkson's QB retreat. And you can see the physical talent, the ability in his arm to make all the throws. And you see he's got this athleticism dynamic to his game as well. And he's just not really frazzled. So if he gets into Washington State and he handles that level of competition change and takes that in stride, I think this is a player who has all of the physical tools that really move the needle for when you want to bet on traits at the quarterback position. And I'm really excited to see it because, as I mentioned, he's got some familiar faces that are going to be around him there at Washington State. Joe, I'm going to come to you next, and I want to hear who you think might be a guy who plays his way in from the outside looking in.
Yeah, the player I want to go with here is one of the Service Academy players from Army, Andre Carter. He's a pass rusher, and my goodness, did he have a breakout season in 2021, 17 tackles for loss, 14 and a half sacks. He forced 4 fumbles. And, we talk about the NFL being a quarterback-driven league, and that's very, very much true. But NFL still wants guys that can get after the quarterback. And there's a lot of appeal with Andre Carter, 6'7", 265 pounds, plenty of length. And what excites me about him is the length and his ability to kind of just work around edges, right? There's a slipperiness about this guy when he gets to the edges of blockers. And then obviously he has just a ton of reach that allows him to influence quarterbacks and influence the space that they want to have available to them in the pocket. And so I like the skill set that he has to build upon. I think the big thing with Andre is he's got to get stronger and show that he can be a better player at the point of attack and, add some power elements to the way that he wins. But the production speaks volumes, the length, the slipperiness, all of that is very appealing to me. And I think if he can stack another season together like he had in 2021 while showcasing a little bit more power at the point of attack, this is going to be a pass rusher that teams are going to value potentially in that first-round range.
There you have it. A couple of names for everybody to watch who might not be ranked particularly high or at all on the consensus TDN 100 ranks here as we start the 2022 college football season, but could play their way up. We'll be keeping an eye on these players and the rest of the 2023 eligibles throughout the course of this season, and we will be updating the TDN 100 each and every month moving forward, so make sure you check out thedraftnetwork.com for the full list, and you stay plugged in at the Draft Network for all of your college football and NFL wants and needs as this season gets underway.